All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Culture. My name is Javier Bustamante. I am the director of the Center for Cultural Engagement, and I am excited to be addressing all of you incoming freshmen as you are preparing to come to our campus and begin this academic journey. So I'm very excited that I'm joined by two great colleagues from the university here who are going to help us have this conversation about culture and identity. Let me, if I may, just turn the mic over to my colleagues here. If you could introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do on our campus.
Hi, welcome to CUA. My name is Shawnee Bennett, and I am one of the academic and career advisors within the Center for Academic and Career Success. I work specifically with business and humanities students, and I'm here to support you all throughout your academic and career endeavors.
Yes, and for me, my name is Jenna Radkins. I work in residence life. My buildings are Ryan, Regan, and Flather, also known as North Neighborhood 2. And I just got done my first year at Catholic, so I'm kind of like going into my sophomore year as somebody in student affairs at Catholic. So similarly, also here to support you in a lot of different areas of your life outside of academics.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. And again, my name is Javier Bustamante. I am the director of the Center for Cultural Engagement, and I hope all of you will visit the CCE. We are located in Pris 207. So please do come by and get a free cup of coffee whenever you want. All right. So let's jump in and let's talk about culture. So one of the things I wanted to just, give you a brief definition. There are a lot of definitions of what culture is, but I like this one is culture is what shapes the human being, specifically human. So we as human beings are the ones who produce culture. We have a culture. That's what sets us apart from the rest of creation, right? So culture primarily expresses how people live and perceive the world, how they perceive one another, and how they even perceive the sacred, how they perceive the divine, right? And how they interact with others in the divine as well. Culture is a set of values by which people will judge, accept, and live. So these are, culture helps communities and people and groups to really set boundaries, to develop how the relationships are going to work, how decisions are made. So culture is very, very integral into who we are and what we do in our everyday life. And so I just want to very briefly introduce you to this idea of the cultural iceberg. Basically, we all have a culture, so that's something that we need to understand. And if we think of culture as an iceberg, there's a piece of the iceberg that is visible that you can see, and there's a huge chunk that is actually under the surface. And for most of us, when we've encountered somebody from a different culture, the pieces from the top are the easiest ones to identify, right? The music, the food, the language, perhaps some of the mannerisms and things like that. But what we don't see, and oftentimes what we neglect to, to identify in people, is what's under the surface, like the deep, important things that actually make that particular culture, the way that they grieve, the way that they respond to joy, the way that they celebrate, the ways that they develop relationships between family members and with others. So all these different things are kind of hidden under the surface, and what we need to know is when we enter into relationships with people of other cultures, and since we all have a culture as well, when our two icebergs kind of come together, sometimes the clash happens under the surface and we don't even see it, right? And it is because our values sometimes come crashing against each other, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we have to recognize that that is what's happening. So I want to turn it over to my colleagues here. And I want to just invite you, if you could talk a little bit about how your culture has shaped who you are. And maybe we'll start with you, Jenna, if it's okay.
Sure. Yes. I love that iceberg picture, because I think I was really thinking about when you had invited us to come on. There's a really easy answer to like, how has your culture shaped me? Because I'm European American, like families from Ireland and Poland. But very long ago, when I really think about it, I'm like, that's my easy answer. My easy answer of what's your culture is, yeah, I'm Irish and Polish, but the reality is I don't do a ton with that. So in terms of like, how has culture shaped me? I like the much broader spectrum of that, if it's not totally just like where did my family come from however many, I don't know, decades ago. And although I think that's important, I do have pride in being, I would say honestly, more Irish than I do Polish, because I don't know a ton about my Polish heritage. For me, a lot of when I think about my culture, I think about like my family and my upbringing, and I didn't really question a lot of like, what the heck is my culture and how do I describe it until I got to college. And when I got to college, that's when it became this, kind of hit me like, I don't have to just kind of fit in this box of like white Irish American person, because there's so much other dynamic things about me that I never really got to, I feel like you don't get to share in that. So it's kind of like at least my intro to the conversation of like, I kind of feel like when I got to college, I didn't really, not that I maybe like felt cultureless. Like, I don't know that I really felt like I had a culture. And then when I got to college, I was like, wow, no, I have a lot of, like, my family's really weird traditions, and we do some goofy stuff that I love that probably makes no sense to a lot of other people, but like learning about the world and learning about how like the way that I am perceived and the way that I perceive the world and the way the world perceives me, that really didn't start happening until college, and realizing that like, wow, it all does actually come into effect. Which I'll probably give more examples as we keep going, but that's sort of like my very broad intro of like that iceberg is pretty awesome, because I think it's so much bigger than the surface level, like, yeah, I love potatoes and I'm Irish, like, look at that, you know, like it's so much bigger than that. But I don't know if either of you would say something similarly, but that's kind of like where I'm starting with this conversation.
Much like you, Jenna, going off to college was when I guess I started to really think about my culture and the ways that my culture impacted my life, because I did attend a predominantly white institution, and in doing so, I still did find an affinity to the Black people on campus. And in doing so, I realized that many of us had shared experiences. Many of us had those same conversations with our parents growing up. Many of us ate the same foods. So it's like, wow, like this is our culture. And for me, I kind of battle with that, because I am the product of an African-American mother who grew up in Miami, Florida, and a father who grew up in Jamaica and came to the States for his education. So I'm kind of, in some senses, I am a first-generation American, and then in other senses, I'm not. So I kind of give myself, I consider myself kind of the best of both worlds. Like, who doesn't want to have that Southern food and Southern comfort, and then who doesn't want that good Jamaican experience and culture as well? And then in that too, like now that I'm starting to think about it, I remember those times when I would visit my dad during the summer or during the holidays, and we would be listening to reggae music, or we would visit his childhood home, and I would get to talk with my great grandmother. So all of those pieces also do get to tie into that culture. Like, this is where he lived. This is where he, started off, and then he came to the States, and we have this whole new life and culture that we've taken on. And even in doing that too, I kind of realized that, okay, in Jamaica, they speak an English dialect called patois. But then when I come and talk to my friends, they don't even know certain things that I'm saying. And I'm like, oh, so I do have like this grand culture that I didn't even know that I had. Like, I have all these pieces of me that others have not experienced yet.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's really awesome.
Thank you both. This is great. College is the best time to start exploring these questions about identity
Yes.
and who you are, right? So if you could share maybe one story of how, in your culture, your particular culture deals with some of these life moments. Shani, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. So this one, loss, joy, happiness, milestones, I can honestly say that we pretty much celebrate them all the same way. And it's a celebration and a party of some sort. It's a group of family members that are getting together. We've often referred to funerals as like ad hoc family reunions, because everyone just comes together. There's drinking involved, there's partying, we're celebrating the life. Even though we've lost a loved one, we're still celebrating life, and we're still glad to be with one another. So I found that in any aspect, whether we're celebrating or we're mourning, there's always some type of food, there's always some type of celebration involved.
Mm-hmm. I would say the same thing. The immediate thing that I think of is when my mom passed away, where I'm currently at home in my parents' house in Pennsylvania. I'm one of those outside of Philly people who say wooder. So if you're watching, you talk about dialect, like wooder class. So my mom lived next door, and my dad grew up in this neighborhood since he was 9, and he's now much significantly older than 9, so he's been here a really long time. And when my mom died, we grieved her death, but like totally celebrated her life for like a week. And it's one of my favorite memories. And I always feel a little like clunky in social settings, being like, oh yeah, when my mom died, that was one of my favorite memories growing up, because like that sounds horrible. But people came from all over. We really spent like a full week, like just same deal, like looking at pictures and kind of eating and drinking and going to Phillies games and visiting family in Jersey and like getting to, I don't know, like sit in the water and all that kind of stuff. There it is, water. And it was awesome. So I think there's always, and I don't know where that comes from, but I think the family always tries to find some positive spin of whatever's happening. So if we've had other deaths in the family that were not nearly as natural. My mama was in her 80s and it was like the natural cycle of life. And when the not so natural deaths happen, we grieve and we're criers. We cry a lot. I'm a crier, product of two very big criers. But it can always find like the joy of how can we move on from this? How can this make us a closer family? So I think there's always some element of like spinning it some way that we acknowledge our feelings, but then optimistically try to move forward. But definitely like big celebrations of life are very common in this
Awesome.
for sure.
That's awesome, because I was just thinking of how we grieve in my culture. So I'm from Peru, and as a Latino, growing up there, I remember when my grandmother passed, there was a moment of a lot of crying, a lot of tears. We also recognized and celebrated her life. And then we went into the grieving process, right? So everybody was wearing black. And then it was a long period of time, and it wasn't until my stepmom decided that she was done with her period of grieving where we could also be free from that grieving process. So that was just, so that's, and to be honest, now that I don't live with my family, I kind of miss those experiences, because I've had important people who have passed away in the last few years, and I haven't really had that culture built around me to kind of put me back into that process. So I've learned to grieve differently now that I'm here. So just, the fascinating of how our cultures are similar in some ways, but very distinct in other ways as well. So thank you both for sharing about that. So let's go to this next question of why do you think it's important to get to know people of other cultures? You talked a little bit about your college experiences and kind of discovering yourself. Why is that an important piece? And I'll throw it at you, Jenna, first.
Yeah, from when I really think about the why is it important? For me in college, when I put let me backtrack. I think it has to be a pretty intentional choice too. Like you can't just kind of be in this environment and then people will just infuse their cultures into you. Like you have to kind of put yourself out there, and you might be a little sweaty, but you have to put yourself out there to ask and listen. And for me, what was so important about it was it kind of puts you in this position of like, you have to be the listener. Like you're not the expert. You are not the leader in this room, because you are purposely putting yourself in a situation that may be a little foreign to you. And honestly, my favorite example from college is I had friends who were in a gospel choir, and I could never participate in the gospel choir because it always conflicted with my work schedule because I was an RA. Never really worked out. But then by my second semester of senior year, I was no longer an RA. So like, to be honest, I don't think I realized this, but I think I kind of used my schedule as like a scapegoat. Like, oh, I can't come because I would love to, but like I can't because I'm working. But I think I had my own fears about that. Like I knew there was very few people who were white in this gospel choir, but like I loved singing, and I was in Catholic campus ministry on campus, and I loved my faith, and it was just a big outlet for me. So I finally was like, I think I just need to, like, I have friends in this gospel choir, and I just need to go. I'll go to one rehearsal and we'll see how it happens. And it was such an amazing learning experience for me, because I think it was exactly that. Like, I was not the leader of this room. Like, I was not somebody who was supposed to roll in and like, I just listened and I learned, and I was an alto, and it was great. And I learned different ways to acknowledge my faith, because I grew up Catholic, and Catholic is very structured. We like our structure, we like our hour-long mass, and we do other things outside of mass. But to be in an environment where we went to a performance at a church, and our service lasted about like 3.5 hours. And it was so new to me because the songs just, every time I was like, okay, I think we're done now. I was like so parched. I was like, I think, are we done? I don't know, are we done? And someone would say something and then we would start singing, he is good all the time. And I was like, oh, we're not done. It was so funny to me because mass, what would be mass, lasted almost all of Sunday. And that was so new. And it was great. I like couldn't believe how much, and I never would have gotten that joy. And I never would have realized that gospel music is there are a few songs I love so much, and I'm not great at keeping up with it, but like I never would have been able to tap into that piece of myself if I never tried. And being able to just be a listener and not a leader in that moment and hear about different perspectives and people of different races and other than my own was like really such I'm so happy that I did it because it really kind of helped after college. I was like, yeah, like it's so important to just go out of your comfort zone. And even, like I said, I was sweaty, don't get me wrong, but like, it was awesome. Like, and I'm so glad that I made all that whole group of friends because we had the best time.
I was in gospel choir too, so making me reminisce.
It was so fun.
It's great.
And oh my gosh, we had so much fun. I wish I was in it for longer.
Javier, to your question of the importance of getting to know people on a deeper level, I'll kind of share a brief story of my parents. So my dad, as I mentioned, is from Jamaica, and with that being a Caribbean island, their views of America or Black Americans is slightly skewed by the media. So, you know, people in his culture they kind of turn a face to Black Americans, and they're like, oh, they're lazy, they're this, they that, you know, they paint us as in this negative light. And the reason I say it's very important to get to know people on a deeper level, because had my dad chose to listen to his cultural ideals of what it means to be Black in America and listen to his peers, he wouldn't have been able to develop a relationship with my mom. And I wouldn't be able to be here today talking to you. All right. So I think that that's just a part of that, getting to the real piece of who the person is and getting to know them on a deeper level.
Sure.
Thank you. Those are great, great stories. That was our final question. I really appreciate both of you sharing your stories and, you know, helping highlight how important culture is to all of us, and especially for incoming freshmen as they're getting ready. This is going to be the time of self-discovery on so many levels, that we hope they also take the time to ask these questions about themselves, who they are, and how they relate to others. And hopefully through that experience, they can grow and become better men and women.